The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Please welcome a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, Rich Anderson, representing District 51. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody. It's always good to be on your show.
So we're about 1 week into the new session. How are things going?
Well, it's the typical run-up to a new legislative session of the General Assembly. We convened 1 week ago today. We always do during the on the second Wednesday of each January. And so we're up to a full head of steam now. Committees and subcommittees are meeting, and legislation is starting to get to the House floor. And whatever makes it out from there, we'll send it over to the Senate. And whatever makes it out from there, then we'll hike it over to the governor for his action. But it's a pretty brisk start of the General Assembly session. We're going to have a lot of meaty issues, I think.
Now, a week ago tonight, the governor gave his State of the Commonwealth address. I know you were present there. He outlined a number of things, including his budget. What was your take on his address?
Well, I was not present. Actually,
Oh,
I
okay.
watched it from, let's say, a remote location.
Okay.
The speaker always appoints one delegate to be absent from the chamber because all of the state elected officials are present, and for continuity of government purposes, there's always one delegate who's designated to be away from there. And so I watched it from another location. The governor, of course, outlined a whole host of issues. The one that I obviously focused on as a member of the House Appropriations Committee was, in fact, the introduced budget that he handed off to the General Assembly on December 17th. And so we are now in the process within the confines of the Appropriations Committee going through that and obviously imprinting it with the priorities of the House, and the Senate at the other end of the building is doing precisely the same thing. I guess if I could, in just the very broadest general terms, the budget is the first budget to exceed $100 billion. It's
First budget to exceed $100 billion.
Correct.
Wow.
It's at the $109 billion level as introduced. Based on predicted healthy revenues coming in. And so we'll see where it goes. I'd like to see us not spend every penny. I know that my family, we try to spend less than we take in. So there's an old saying that make $9, spend 10, sad, make $10, spend 9, happy.
Right. Now, you serve on a number of other committees, however. Tell us about those committee assignments and what kind of subject matters they entail.
Okay. Well, in addition to the House Appropriations Committee, and I serve on 3 subcommittees there, by the way. I serve on the Public Safety Subcommittee that takes care of law enforcement, fire and rescue, and the National Guard. I also serve on the Transportation Subcommittee, kind of ideally suited for someone who lives in the thick congestion of it in Northern Virginia. And then lastly, I serve on the Higher Education Committee, funding for Virginia's public colleges and universities. The first 2 I've been on for 2 years. The third one was added just last week by Chairman Jones. But in addition to the Appropriations Committee, I serve on the House General Laws Committee, which is that body that focuses on issues that don't fit neatly into the portfolios of the other 13 standing permanent House committees. I also serve on the House Committee on Science and Technology, and effective in last year, I was named as chairman with Barbara Comstock's departure elected to Congress. And so all those in the collective keep me pretty busy.
Absolutely. Now, back to the budget, and especially those subcommittees you serve on. Does the chairman parse out pieces of the budget to those subcommittees to look at in more detail and come up with
That's
recommendations?
correct. Absolutely. That's the beauty of the committee system. The committee system is such that we receive, I think the metric is about 3,000 bills per session, and we end up passing roughly out of both houses and on to the governor for action about half that amount. Those are very rough numbers, but somewhere in that neighborhood. And so the only way that in a 2-month legislative session, and in some years, as you know, it's a 6-week session,
Right.
the only way you can focus on that amount of work is to burden share, divvy it up, share it with other legislative bodies. And so the committee structure and on down through the subcommittee structure gives the members and their chairs the opportunity to vet these issues all the way through the process as it makes it up and finally is seen by the entire membership on the House floor. It's just the most effective way to move legislation. And typically, if you've served on a committee for a number of years, you've developed a certain skill set regarding those issues that typically come to that committee. And so you can look at business that comes to the floor from a committee on which you do not serve with some confidence that those among us, both parties, who have developed expertise in certain subject matter areas have really vetted it, and you can look at it with some vote of confidence. It's been really worked over well.
Well, let's talk to a matter that's near and dear to your heart because you're a veteran.
Right.
And I know you have a high degree of interest and support for veterans, be they on active duty yet or retired here in the state of Virginia. Talk to us about what's going on for our veterans in the Commonwealth.
Right. Well, everyone comes down here with a focus on what they want to work on, typically based on their life's experiences. And as a guy that spent 30 years in an Air Force uniform, I'm very interested in Veterans Matters, ended up chairing the General Assembly Military and Veterans Caucus, which is a clearinghouse and advocacy body that meets once a week. We met this morning to discuss several dozen veterans bills that are making their way through the legislative journey. And so that is what I have been focused on. Both houses, both parties are very veteran-centric. We're working together on that. And obviously, veterans issues are very nonpartisan issues that really unify us all. So I enjoy working in that area. We have a great Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs in the person of retired Navy Admiral John Harvey, and a very engaged Department of Veterans Services headed up by Commissioner John Newby. They work with us very intently and also with the Virginia Veterans Volunteer Community, a body known as the Joint Leadership Council. Those are individuals who advise us all on areas they want emphasized on behalf of veterans, and each represents, those 23 representatives on the Joint Leadership Council represent veteran service organizations. So we're getting it right from the horse's mouth, those things that veterans consider to be important.
Talk to us about the Veteran Service Centers. I believe one in Northern Virginia and one in the Hampton Roads area that are going to be established.
Correct. Everyone's familiar with the Federal Veterans Administration and the work that they do. But the body of veterans that are eligible for their services is so large that many states have created their own veteran care center networks. And here in Virginia, for a number of years, probably the last 20 years before I ever came on the legislative scene, we have had 2 Virginia Veterans Care Centers, one located in Salem, Virginia, just adjacent to Roanoke, and it's co-located with the Veterans Administration Center there. There is a companion Virginia Veterans Care Center in Richmond, Virginia, co-located with the McGuire Veterans Administration Center. And they provide comprehensive care for older veterans who are in need of more intensive care. And they also have a mission of taking care of injured military personnel. And this is a smaller mission, but military personnel who are transitioning from military to civilian life. And so what we envision now is increasing our capacity, rough terms, by 100%, doubling it, by constructing a Northern Virginia Veterans Care Center and a Hampton Roads Virginia Veterans Care Center. Delegate Chris Stolley has worked very intently in the Hampton Roads area on that, and there are several venues. I think it's 2 venues that have offered land on which construction can take place. Delegate Stolley is advocating for Virginia Beach that he represents, and in Northern Virginia we have 3 venues, one of which is Prince William County that I represent, and I'm working very intently with the Prince William Board of County Supervisors on fielding it in Prince William County, because we have 50,000 veterans in the county, and it's very central to all Northern Virginia localities, and so we're working very hard on that. Prince William County has agreed to deed 27 acres of land to the Commonwealth of Virginia, that if we are selected, then construction will take place on that 27-acre parcel. So it's a pretty good arrangement for Northern Virginia and the veterans of the Commonwealth.
Tell us a little bit about the mental health needs of veterans. Some people suggest that because of some of the problems that they've experienced in theaters of war, when they come back, they need a lot of guidance and counseling. Some of them get in trouble with the law as a result of that. Some suggest that there's a need for a specialized court, for example, to deal with veterans in terms of criminal offenses as well.
That's correct. Well, what you're speaking of is post-traumatic syndrome, stress syndrome, PTSD, and then TBI, traumatic brain injuries, where there are physical head injuries that affect motor skills and cognitive skills in the brain. There's a very real need for those services in Northern Virginia, or throughout the Commonwealth, I should say, and particularly because Virginia is one of the fastest growing veterans concentrations in the nation. With 2 protracted wars in the Iraqi and the Afghan theater of operations, we have a whole new demographic that is entering the general population after military service and needing those sorts of care. Now, within Virginia, we have a very invigorated organization that falls under the Department of Veterans Services. It went through a name change last October. It was originally known as the Virginia Wounded Warrior Program, and I may not get this name and new designation entirely correct, but it's something on the order of Virginia Veterans and Family Care Program. But it's to take care of those veterans and their families. There is funding in the budget to increase the level of services that we can provide, and I'm hopeful that that will navigate its way through the legislative process.
Now, what about homelessness? I understand Virginia ranks very well in terms of veterans who are no longer homeless, for example. I take it, though, that may still be a problem.
Well, as you know, the executive branch has been focusing, along with the legislative branch, on trying to take veteran homelessness, just because of the special nature of that population and the services they render to the country, and drive it as low as possible. There was an initiative in the executive branch in recent months to move veterans out of unsheltered situations and into other types of housing that's more permanent and protective in nature. And as a result, they declared veteran homelessness to be, the phraseology that was used was effectively eliminated, and effectively because there are some individuals in homeless camps who are there by choice. Certainly not the majority, but there are some. But that will require our continual focus, because as we have moved some out of a homeless situation, just over the passage of time, other veterans may move into the homeless category. So it will require constant care and attention.
Now, what about children of active duty military, especially who are in our school systems here, especially K through 12? You know, they have some real challenges in terms of moving from one school district to another, from state to state. God forbid that an accident occurs while their parent is abroad, or their parent is injured or killed what kinds of programs, if any, do we have for those children in our school districts?
Well, there are a number of programs that exist for children whose lives are adversely impacted because of the military service of their parents. At one time, my wife and I both were in the Air Force uniform. I was wore it for 30 years. She wore it for 21 years, and we were required at that time to do legal arrangements that if something particularly happened to both of us, that there would be alternative arrangements, principally with a family member typically, or with a close friend, to provide not only temporary care, but long-term care. That's number one. That's part and parcel of military life for families in any of the armed services. Here in Virginia, though, we specifically identify students who reside in a military household of either one or two parents, and it's a military child identifier, and that's the gateway so that there can be a special focus on particularly special class of individuals.
Now, talk to us a little bit more about how we harness the energy of our veterans, especially in terms of those who want to start small businesses, for example. Obviously, the new Virginia economy that the governor talked about needs an influx of small businesses in the Commonwealth, and certainly we should be taking advantage of the experiences that our veterans have.
Well, veterans, first of all, I believe by and large, and I know this intuitively, I can't lay a bunch of numbers out for you. I'm sure there's an agency that can, but make good business owners. They tend to be solid citizens because the nature of military duty is such that you develop citizens that have a rock solid work ethic. And so we do all we can throughout Virginia state government to encourage that. There's another area, though, that I'd like to mention because it's something that I've focused on in recent years, and it's for those individuals who choose not to start their own business but wish to be a part of an established business that is doing great things for our Commonwealth and its economy. It's called the Virginia Values Veterans Program, the V3 program for short. 2 years ago, I carried legislation along with Senator Toddy Puller over in the Senate. We carried companion bills that created that. It's a program by which businesses and employers across the Commonwealth who want to hire veterans, they go through a day-long seminar to learn how to advertise, interview, hire, and retain veterans in high-paying jobs with good benefits, medical and other benefits that would accrue to them. And what they find in return is that they get an individual who has a world-class work ethic, and they're value added to the business environment in Virginia. So far, we have hired over 9,000 veterans under the category of the Virginia Values Veterans Program, and we're moving toward 12,000, and that's of 12,000 that have been pledged by these businesses. The ultimate goal is to get as high as 20,000.
Great. What about certifications for members of the military who are returning from theaters of war who have special expertise? For example, if I were in the medic corps and come back and want to become an EMT, is there a program that would give me credit for the experience I had?
Well, every year it seems like we have a different piece of legislation introduced that does just that, takes unique military skills and capitalizes on them in the civilian work sector. And for instance, last year I carried a piece of legislation on behalf of George Mason University, which gave credit to veterans who had worked in the cyber warfare career field, and to get credit for their work experiences so that they could shortchange the time requirements and graduate earlier at George Mason in the cyberspace area of discipline. We did the same thing for military medics to be able to enter various medical fields at George Mason University. This year, Delegate Chris Stotley is carrying a similar bill that takes what I did regarding military medics and corpsmen and broadening it even further and putting more energy into it.
Now, you mentioned George Mason University. It's a pretty large institution. I think it may have the largest student body population in the state now. It has grown by leaps and bounds.
It has, and in my own county of Prince William, the campus that's located there in Innovation Park has been designated by George Mason as the Science and Technology Campus. So they focus very intently on STEM disciplines.
Right, science, technology, engineering, math.
Right, and
Okay.
it's very compatible with what I do as chairman of the House Committee on Science and Technology.
Okay.
So it's resulted in a renewed friendship between me in my Science and Technology Committee capacity and that campus. I spend quite an amount of time on that campus. I'm a graduate of Virginia Tech, and Dr. Sands, the president of Virginia Tech,
Right.
reminds me that I'm doing quite a bit with George Mason.
Tell us a little bit more about that committee. That's very interesting, and that obviously is a very critical issue in the relationship you have with George Mason University.
Right.
But what other kinds of things does that committee look at?
Well, the whole idea of the Science and Technology Committee is economic development in the area of science and technology, be it cyberspace or any other disciplines that are levied under the science and tech rubric. We have around Virginia various science and technology associations that bring together the science and tech community, and it's all about nurturing them and encouraging others to move to Virginia from other states so that they join this family of science and tech companies that are such a crucial part of a vibrant economy.
Now, you mentioned Virginia Tech, and I think they have quite a bit of science and technology going on there as well. Is that something that you keep abreast of and work with that university
Yes,
as
I
well?
do. And Dr. Sands, the president
Right.
of Virginia Tech, was in my office the other day, and we agreed that I was going to go down to Virginia Tech in about the April, May timeframe to see some of their technology programs that are in progress. They are a nationally recognized leader in the area of transportation technology, and particularly in the area of driverless vehicles. And so I want to go down and see the driving range that they have and immerse myself in some of the research that they're doing.
Great. You know, another kind of interesting phenomena that they may be working on as well, and that will have an impact on the ability to get people jobs, is the increased use of robotics in a lot of warehouses now and in a lot of other endeavors. I assume that's something that you will be looking at as well.
Well, because I'm affiliated now pretty deeply with science and technology here in Virginia, I get a lot of invitations to go to robotics competitions with elementary, middle, and high school students. In Prince William, I was invited to go to one of these meets on a Saturday. They gathered for 4 hours at one of our high schools. I thought I'd show up and see 50 budding scientists at work at this robotics event. I walked in the door and there were 900 of them
900.
there. There's
Wow.
something about robotics that just captures the imagination of young folks, and it permits the schools to teach them multiple disciplines through this one activity of robotics.
And of course, I guess that also encompasses drones, for example, especially the very small ones that people like Amazon want to use
Oh,
to
yeah.
deliver products to us.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, in that area, I think we've got to figure out a way ahead as this technology emerges to protect privacy of
Yes.
people, and particularly in the area of drones, to protect privacy of folks, but at the same time, come up with a rule set that nurtures the economic impact in the business community. Use of drones. I will not mind if someday I see a drone putting my Amazon.com package on my
Exactly.
front doorstep.
Exactly. And of course, I take it there's also a safety issue there in terms of air traffic.
Right.
Potentially as well.
Well, every so often you read an item in the news about
Right.
where perhaps a drone has come particularly close to a commercial aircraft. So the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they're moving into this very cautiously, but I'll predict that there will be a system that will accommodate both.
Sure. Let's get into something particular again, another public safety matter that you've been involved in for a number of years now. You've reintroduced a piece of legislation dealing with hands-free use of communication devices.
I have. Well, the use of hands-free devices behind the wheel is absolutely endemic. We did a bill 3 years ago that took the offense of texting while driving and elevated it from a secondary offense to a primary offense. So if a law enforcement officer saw anyone texting while driving, they could stop them for that and that alone. And we also increased the fine structure to as a disincentive to text while drive. The practice, though, continues. The law enforcement has stepped up their enforcement of those who text while drive, but nonetheless, it still is a very prevalent activity by drivers behind the wheel. And what you have is not distracted driving, it's impaired driving. And so I've introduced another bill that will cover more areas of what you can do with your cell phone, because my last bill from 2 years ago prohibited texting while driving. We want to go after other impairing activities behind the wheel. Law enforcement supports it because it makes it much easier for them to enforce the law. And I think I have a moral obligation to several dozen families that I've stood in front of,
Sure.
families who have lost loved ones to texting drivers, and reintroduce the bill. Whether it passes or not, I will continue to reintroduce it because I made a pledge to those families.
So what's been the resistance to it?
Well, the resistance has been that it represents intrusiveness into the vehicle itself and excessively regulating the activity of a driver, of a vehicle operator. And I just disagree with that, because we heavily regulate the use of alcohol behind the wheel, and all research shows that this distracted behavior results in an impairment on the same order as driving while intoxicated.
Just a few moments left, but I wanted you to touch on the importance of the state as a result of you serving, especially on the Appropriations Committee, in retaining its AAA bond rating, and why that's so significant.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely crucial. We've had a AAA bond rating for over 7 decades, and only a small number of states, I mean a handful of states, I think there's 8 to 10 states that have a AAA bond rating. And what that does is that it lets us borrow money at lower interest rates, and to be able to provide the goods and services that we do as a state to our citizens. So it's an absolutely critical thing to retain that. It's no different than you and I ensuring that we maintain a high Experian or other rating,
Right.
So that we can purchase homes, cars, and other commodities. So it's crucial that we maintain our AAA rating.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, Delegate Rich
Always
Anderson from
great to
District 51.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.